They say time heals all wounds, but when it comes to the loss of a child, time just hardens the scar. It never truly heals. For 20 years I've carried the ache in my chest, a missing piece, a silence at the dinner table, an absence in every family photo. Still, I built new routines around the emptiness, learning which hallway to avoid, which memories to redirect whenever they surged too strong, too sudden. I became a master at packing grief away into small, manageable boxes. It was the end of a long week, late autumn, when leaves turn brittle and every gust of wind carries them down the street like hurried ghosts. I had decided, for reasons I couldn't fully explain, to finally clean out the attic. Maybe it was guilt, too many boxes sitting untouched, gathering dust along with secrets, and the kind of clutter you swear you'll get to one day. Or maybe it was just time. I found myself hauling boxes to the center of the floor, unspooling packing tape that whined like a distant animal, flipping through old report cards and wrapping paper, birthday hats, and all the bittersweet tokens of a life lived before everything changed. That's when I found it. Near the back, half buried under a stack of my son's old elementary school art projects, I noticed a battered-looking book, black, with frayed corners and a faded Spider-Man sticker on the front. The kind of sticker my son always begged for at the grocery store checkout. My hands trembled. There had been no mention of a diary among his things, nothing in the police reports, nothing when we'd inventoried his room after he was gone. The attic air felt heavier, thick with dust motes swirling in the golden afternoon light. For a moment I debated setting it aside, maybe even hiding it from myself, from the future me who would stumble across it in another 20 years. Curiosity won in the end. Grief surrendered to longing. Sitting amid half-opened boxes, knees aching, I turned the front cover. The first page was inscribed in clumsy handwriting. "If you find this, please don't be mad. I just want to remember." My breath caught, a tangle of sadness and something else, anticipation, maybe even relief, a gift wrapped in pain. "Madam," the earliest entry was dated 3 weeks before he died. I steadied myself, the house so quiet that the shifting of the rafters sounded like distant footfalls. I started to read. Today Miss Franklin made us write something called a future letter. She said we should pretend it's for our future selves. I wrote that I hope Dad and I still have pancake Sundays, and that I'm not scared of the basement anymore. I'm hiding this under the loose board in my closet, so nobody finds out I'm still scared of the dark. Dad says bravery isn't the same as not being scared. Maybe that's true. But if this diary is for my future, can my future self help me? His words made me smile. Despite the ache, I smiled, picturing the way he used to worry his bottom lip and scribble with relentless focus, hunched over a page. The little ritual he had, closing his eyes before turning a diary page, maybe so he could imagine something better waiting on the other side. There were more entries. Each one tethered me to something I thought I'd lost, his handwriting, his humor, his worries. But as I read, the entries started to shift, growing stranger and more urgent. Last night I heard someone at the window. I thought it was Alex playing a prank, but the shadows were all wrong. Dad, if you find this, don't be mad. I saw someone in the yard again tonight. He was by the oak tree. He called my name, but his mouth didn't move. Goosebumps prickled down my arms. I could almost feel the raw, pre-digital childhood anxiety in the words. Kids see things adults miss or dismiss. But the more I read, the more insistent the entries became. There was knocking last night, 3 knocks, then nothing. I thought maybe it was the wind, but then I heard Mom's voice in the hall, even though I know Mom was asleep. When I opened the door, nobody was there. The air smelled burned, like after fireworks. Please don't be mad if I'm scared. When I word some rhymes and dinedless, and dombless, and Mom was plates, agwo, myav, it's calmly tombiaf, centenarmwas. In 20 years, nobody, no therapist, no officer, no friend, had ever told me about any of this. Grief mixed with guilt. Had I missed the signs? I had always blamed myself, in that private way parents do, for not seeing more, doing more, investigating more. But now, for the first time, I wondered what exactly I should have seen. My logical side tried to reassure me. Kids have vivid imaginations, especially when the house is old and the world outside feels unpredictable. But another part of me, an older, quieter part, felt something shift. The attic grew cold, despite the insulation. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jarringly loud, snapping me back. A calendar alert, nothing urgent. Still, I shivered. I kept reading. Something weird happened after school today. Alex came over but wouldn't go into my room. He said it felt wrong, like there was a bad feeling, like being watched. Mom told me to clean up before dinner, but I stayed in the hall because I didn't want to go back in my room. When Dad tucked me in later, I almost said something. I didn't. I didn't want him to think I was being a baby. I couldn't help but remember those days, the stretch of weeks before we lost him. How often had he hesitated before bed or asked for an extra light? Little things dismissed as the innocent fears of childhood. If I could go back, what would I do differently? But you never really know, do you? At the bottom of the box, half hidden under an old blanket, I found a small photograph. My son, squinting into the sun, holding the same diary close to his chest. There was a smudge at the photo's edge, a shadow, maybe, or maybe just a flaw in the film. Even now, my mind played tricks, seeing mystery where there might be none. I pressed on, reading the next entry, one that would change everything I thought I understood about those last weeks. My son's handwriting changed as the pages moved on, thinner, more hurried, the words pressed deep into the paper as if the pen itself was trembling. Couldn't sleep last night again. The man by the tree came closer. I thought if I hid under my blankets I'd be safe, but I heard tapping at my window again. It was late, almost midnight. I tried not to look, but I couldn't help it. At first I thought it was a shadow, but it was too tall, and it had no face, just darkness. I listened to music to drown out the sound, but sometimes I still heard the whispering. It sounds like my voice, but older. I paused, checking the corners of the attic as though I expected someone or something to be there. The air was stuffy. The sunlight had faded from the little window, leaving everything slightly blue, the way light shifts in an aquarium. I read on, heart rattling against my ribs. Dad, please listen to me, even if you think I'm being dumb. I tried to tell Mom, but I think she thought I was joking. Last night, someone opened my closet door while I was sleeping. I know I closed it. I felt cold air. When I looked, there was a wet spot on the rug that wasn't there before. I don't know what it was. That one stopped me. I remembered the time we thought a pipe had leaked, how we'd blamed water stains on old insulation. I remembered the dark, uneven circle beneath his desk. We'd dismissed it. I closed my eyes. For a moment I could picture that room as it was. The spaceship sheets, the baseball glove by the foot of the bed, the closet always a little too dark. I kept reading, pages turning faster, as if I was chasing something or being chased. The next few entries blurred together, full of subtle, increasing panic. In one, he wrote about the feeling of being watched, even in crowds. In another, about dreams he'd have, chasing a figure through endless halls, always just out of reach. But then came something else. An entry dated just 4 days before his death, written in a shaky hand. I don't understand what's happening. Today at school I saw the man again, but he was inside. He stood by the nurse's office, even though nobody else seemed to see him. When I walked by, he whispered, "I'm almost home. Dad, if you find this, I'm sorry. I don't know what I did wrong. Did I do something?" My chest tightened. Guilt is a clever thing. It remembers everything you ever did wrong, no matter how small. I thought of those hurried mornings, dismissing nightmares, telling him not to worry. Had he really been seeing someone? Or was it all a fever dream, memories growing wild in the fertile ground of childhood anxiety? Suddenly, I noticed another page tucked between 2 entries, clearly torn from a different notebook. The paper was thinner, almost translucent against the thick stock of the diary. It was in a different pen, a bright red ink, the kind we never bought, certainly not for school. If you find this page, it means I'm not supposed to be writing anymore. The man from the yard said if I stop, he'll go away. I tried, but I can't sleep unless I write. The attic felt colder, almost as if reading his fears out loud could make them real. I stood for a moment, stretching my legs, the ache of age spreading through my back. Downstairs the clock chimed, startling me. 5 p.m. already. I imagined the house, empty, save for the churr of the old fridge and the tick of the living room mantel clock. I almost closed the diary then. I thought of putting it away, maybe calling my wife, ex-wife now, or maybe someone from the old neighborhood. But I couldn't. I was caught, helpless to the current of memory. The next entry surprised me because it felt so ordinary. Dad, if you read this one day, I hope you know how much I love you. You always say heroes are the ones who never give up even when they're scared. I wish I was brave like you. Maybe I am, and I just don't know it yet. My throat closed up. I found myself reading that line over and over, the way you look at a fading photograph, trying to bring someone closer by force of will. But then, underneath, in a fainter pen, tonight, I think he'll come inside. I shivered. I could see him, small, clutching a flashlight under the covers, thinking he could ward off whatever he feared by writing it down. His world, a universe of shadow, fear, hope, and the safety of words. I read the next entry, written in the narrow, early morning hours. Dear future me, if I ever become you, Mom says things always get better after the darkest night. I'm scared this is the darkest night. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see things I don't remember seeing, places I've never been. The hallway outside my door isn't my hallway. There are pictures on the wall that don't belong to us. I think I'm dreaming when I'm awake. I paused, realizing I'd been holding my breath for paragraphs at a time. The quiet ticked onward, pressing against the edges of the attic. There was only one section left, the final entry, its handwriting sprawled and almost desperate. If whoever finds this isn't Dad, please give this to him. Tell him I tried. Tell him I wasn't scared at the end. Tell him I love him more than anything. That's when the tears finally came. I pressed the old diary to my chest and just let myself cry. The attic, so often a place of avoidance, felt both sacred and haunted at once. It was as though the room itself was listening, marking the moment as something solemn, something that had waited 20 years for me to return and bear witness. Eventually I wiped my eyes, took a shaky breath, and told myself I would read all the entries, no matter how hard. Some things, I was realizing, are endured simply because there's no way around them except through. I was about to close the diary for the night when one page, so thin and stuck it had almost fused to the back cover, caught my eye. Gingerly, I peeled it open. This was different from the others. The tone was almost resigned. If this is my last page, I want it to be a good page. I want it to count. I hope there are pancakes in heaven and that you and Mom can visit sometimes. Tell Alex I'm sorry I never beat him at Mario Kart. Tell Nana I miss her cookies. Tell Dad I tried my best to be brave. Sometimes you fight monsters even if nobody else sees them. I think maybe they aren't real for everybody, but they can still hurt you. I closed my eyes, leaning back against the wooden beam, and for a second I thought I could hear his laugh. It was so sharp, so sudden and bright, it nearly undid me again. Hours must have gone by. My phone rang twice downstairs, a telemarketer, and then someone from the neighborhood association, voicemails blinking unread. I stayed, frozen in a bubble of memory, half grateful, almost ashamed at how alive and close everything felt. I thought about calling his mother, about reading the diary together, line by aching line, but I knew she preferred her own ways of remembering, her own rituals for surviving the unendurable. I decided to wait. Just as I was about to close the diary for good, a slip of paper fluttered from between the final entries. It was a crude map, drawn in pencil. The familiar lines of our house, living room, hall, then a shaky arrow pointing down to basement, and, under that, a question. What's behind Dad's boxes? An old rumor, really. The house was ancient even before we bought it, and there were parts of the basement I hadn't touched in years. My mind leapt back to his entries. The wet patch, the face at the window, the fear of the basement. My body, despite my age, shuddered with an electric, directionless anxiety. Part of me whispered, "Don't go," but I did. Sometimes, 20 years isn't enough to outgrow a dare from your own child. I left the attic, hands shaking, legs stiff, and crept down the stairs. The house had settled into evening, the last shards of sunlight barely tracing the carpet in the hall. Each step to the basement was slower than I remembered. I flicked on the light, and, as usual, the old bulb on the stairs flickered, fussing with the shadows. I followed the map. The boxes stacked haphazardly against the wall. I recognized most: camping gear, holiday stuff, old sports trophies I'd promised one day to clean. I moved them, one by one, using the map to triangulate. No false wall, no obvious gap, until I got to the last, heaviest box. With a reluctant heave, I shifted the box, and underneath was a small wooden trapdoor I'd all but forgotten. Had I ever opened it since moving in? Probably not. Dust and bits of insulation flaked away, revealing a metal pull ring. My hands hovered over the ring. I remembered his words. Sometimes you fight monsters, even if nobody else sees them. My brain swirled with dread and anticipation. I knelt, pried the trapdoor up. It shrieked on old, protesting hinges, revealing a shallow space maybe 2 feet square. Inside, I saw nothing at first but the smell, a sharp, cold must, like old pennies and pine needles, and a whiff of ozone after lightning, and then I saw it, another composition book. The cover, blue-green, warped with age and damp. Across the front, scrawled in my son's hand, for Dad. Beneath it, smaller, read only when you find me. There was a moment when I considered closing the trap door and never opening that notebook. Some wounds, you think, are better left undisturbed. But too many years had already been spent not knowing, not facing, not looking. I reached in, retrieved the book. My hands shook so bad I could hardly grip it without smudging the dust. I sat on the cold floor, knees pressed to my chest, and began to read. The man in the yard is not a man. He's like a picture from a dream. Last night I went to the basement to try and face him. I was tired of being scared. I heard water running under the floor, and when I listened, I heard voices. It sounded like people arguing, but the words were wrong, backwards. When I turned to leave, the lights went out. It was pitch black. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I paused, my own breath shallow, hands numb. Something about the words felt more urgent, heavier. Then the next page. I wasn't alone in the dark. I saw myself, but older. He told me he was sorry he hadn't paid attention sooner. He said sometimes dads get scared too, even if they never say it. For a moment, time doubled in on itself. The words blurred on the page, shimmering, as tears welled in my eyes, blurring the present and the past together. Was he writing what he wished I'd say? Or had he really seen? I kept reading. The basement floor felt harder and colder the longer I sat, the notebook trembling in my grasp. My son's words carried something that went beyond fear, beyond the ordinary distance of decades. There was a thread in those lines, ghost fine, stitching me backward through all the years I'd tried to move forward. My older self told me I need to be brave for both of us. He said there would be a time when you would need to finish the story I started, that you would find my words. He said not all monsters come to hurt you. Some only want to be understood. Some just want to be seen. Sometimes the biggest monsters are the secrets. I exhaled, uneven. Secrets. Ours had grown thick and heavy, a family's collection petrified beneath the surface, pressed under layers of everyday life. I pressed my palm to the diary's cover, suddenly wishing I dared to call out to the dark corners of the basement, as if my voice alone might reach back across time. On the next page, the handwriting was shaky, rushed. I'm sorry for the sadness. I tried so hard. If you found this, you're braver than me, or maybe just older. If you hear the voices, don't listen too long. They sound like people we know, but they're not. Sometimes I think the basement is a place where sadness lives, like it sinks down here when there's too much upstairs. Please don't be angry, Dad. I knew you were hurting too. That's why I asked the man in the yard to stop. I made a promise, for both of us. The sentence trailed off, the pen pressing a deep groove into the paper. Ink bled dark. I stopped reading, staring into the small space beneath the trapdoor, my mind trying to organize the blur of emotion. Grief sharpened by guilt, anxiety quickened by the strange logic of a child's worldview. I had spent 2 decades searching for meaning in grief's shadow, building explanations from hope and regret. Was his death an accident, a misfortune, fate, or some swirling combination of cause and chaos? But somewhere in those confusing scribbles was an apology that wasn't needed. My son had never owed me an explanation, just his presence, however brief. Maybe, I thought, that was the monster he'd been fighting after all. Not a faceless shadow, but the insatiable hunger for comfort or closure, the need for someone, anyone, to promise it really was going to be okay. I turned to the last entry. This one, a single line, written so faintly I had to angle it into the shaft of weak light, slipping through the basement window. I hope you remember the good parts, Dad, not just the ending. It undid me. The words splintered straight through every crusted-over wound. For so many years, birthdays, holidays, the thousand little anniversaries of loss, I'd only ever remembered the end. The hospital room, the phone call, the impossibility of breathing in a world that had suddenly lost its color. Had I ever let myself remember the rest? The laughter that lived in flashbacks, the silly questions at bedtime, the night we built that cardboard fort and he swore it was a spaceship? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to remember it all, the glow not just of the wounds, but of the love that came before them. I gathered the diaries in my arms, both the one from the attic and the secret one from the basement. As I walked upstairs, the house felt changed, less like a haunted shell, more like something waking after a deep sleep. The sun was gone, but the air was warm from somewhere deep inside. I sat down at the kitchen table, the pages fanned out between my arms, and dialed my ex-wife's number. She answered on the first ring. We hadn't spoken like this in over a decade, not since the river of our pain finally wore separate channels. "It's me," I said, my voice catching. I found something. In the attic, and in the basement. There was a pause, but not a cold one. It was the kind of silence that hung above old wounds, not to deepen them, but to honor the depth already carved. "His diary," she said, quietly. "Yes, you should read it with me. There's more." He wanted us both to remember the good parts. We agreed to meet the next day. I spent that night reading everything again, slower this time, letting each word settle into place, not as a summons for guilt, but as a bridge to somewhere lighter. In the quiet, I tried speaking to him, just as if he were seated across the table. "I love you," I said, over and over, promising myself that I'd keep finding the good, no matter how sharp the shadows felt. Morning was gentle. When I opened the curtains, there was new sun dappling the street. The same oak tree in the yard outside, its branches tangled and sturdy and alive. The old ritual of pancakes came easily, as if I'd never stopped. When my ex-wife arrived, we read together. We laughed and cried, and sometimes sat with nothing but the hush between us, letting the scar be what it was, but not all that it was. After she left, I decided to put both diaries not back in the attic or underground, but in a safe place, out in the open, on the living room shelf, where guests could ask, and I could decide to tell the story, or simply lay my hand on the cover as I passed, feeling the living current of memory through my skin. Sometimes the bravest thing is not fighting the monster under the bed, but opening the diary, when you finally find it, 20 years late, and letting it teach you how to carry both the pain and the joy together. In the days that followed, strange things seemed to happen less often. The house felt lighter, not empty, just less burdened. There were quiet whispers at night, old floorboards, a shifting of light, but none of it felt malicious. Some ghosts, I realized, just want you to remember. Sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is give yourself permission to heal, to let the good parts shine, long after you thought you'd forgotten how. And if you ever find a diary, years after you've lost someone you love, don't be afraid to open it. They might just be waiting there, in the words, to remind you. Remember the good parts, Dad, not just the ending.